Coming along in harness racing, Ron Waples was probably an icon when I was coming up. I used to watch him at the old Greenwood Raceway and then Mohawk when I was starting out, and I really idolized the way he drove horses, the way he conducted himself, the way he interacted with people, and just overall great person.
I used to sit on the backstretch at Greenwood Raceway and just watch races all night long and watch Ronnie just do his thing and outdrive everybody, win all the races he wanted to.
Presidential ball wins Cup 10 for Ron Waples.
Welcome back, everyone, to part 2 of the Ask Me Anything special with the legendary Ronnie Waples. Ron, what'd you think of part 1?
I think it went all right on your part, not so good on mine maybe, but it went good on your part.
So we'll just dive right into the next set of questions with Wayne from Hanover asking you, Ron, do you remember your first win and your last win, and what would be considered an active competition?
Well, they're easy to remember, those two, because they're so important in my mind. The first one was at North Bay Sunnydale Raceway with a horse called Ferndale Prince. I think we might have went 2:14 or something. They were speeding pretty good that day. And the last one was with the 2-year-old trot and filly Devil's Advocate that Jack Darling had, and that was in 15, I believe, or 16, 15, I think.
Okay. So Robin from Columbus, Ohio asks, who is the best horse you ever drove?
You know, there again, I kind of doing the same thing as with drivers. I think it's so unfair to compare one horse now compared to 20 or 30 years ago. I mean, I was one of those lucky people that got to drive a lot of good horses, and I mean a lot of horses that people would not even realize I did get to drive, but it's hard to compare. I don't think you can really.
Right. So Jim from Cortice went the other way. You've driven many great horses. Who is the worst horse you've ever drove?
Well, I drove a few of them, I don't mind saying, but there's not one that comes to mind that sticks out in my mind, but there was a few along the way.
So Mark from St. Mary's, Ontario asks you to name the best all-around horse you've ever trained and why.
Well, that's a tough question, Mark. I can go way back to a horse called JD's Buck that was pound for pound one of the best horses I ever drove. And then I come forward to Presidential Ball, was a great, great horse. Then No Sex Please was one of the greatest trotters I ever drove. J.M. Van Gogh, they were all kind of in the same league. They were good, tough horses and very easy to drive.
So now that we've already touched on JD's Buck, Don from Whitby wonders, where does JD's Buck stand amongst the good horses you had, and why did he seem to finish second more often than not?
Well, he was just a great, tough racehorse, like I said a minute ago. At Meadowlands, the year he raced down there, the last year he raced down there, I mean, he got beat by about 5 different horses. It just seemed like I could finish second all the time. I couldn't seem to beat them. One night I remember Patty Drury that looked after him. I said to her, you know, we're going to put an open bridle on Buck tonight. And at that time, you didn't have to make the equipment changes like you do now. So we put an open bridle on him, and Bill O'Donnell had a horse called Genghis Khan in there. And he went away last, and JD's Buck could leave the gate real well. And he got to the front, and he really relaxed, where before he'd kind of be a little on the bit, but he really relaxed. I got the middle right where I wanted, 3/4 pole right where I wanted. Now I'm thinking to myself, okay, Bill, come with Genghis Khan now. So here come Genghis Khan. They come the fastest last quarter in Meadowlands history at that time, 26-3. And guess what? Genghis Khan went by me. I was second again. I said to Bill, I don't know whether you broke Buck's heart or not, but you sure broke mine.
So Bill from Amherstburg wonders, where would Sands of Flying rate among the horses you drove?
I think he would be right up there. I mean, that was a fast horse and a tough horse too. He was a slight horse and had health issues, that horse, all through his life, but my God, he'd go fast.
So Michael from Toronto has asked this question. DreamMaker is my favorite racehorse of all time. I was just a Standardbred racing fan until I became an owner a few years ago. However, in 1978, I bought the photo of him winning the Canadian Pacing Derby, a picture that I still have to this day. May I ask, what value or history did he have as a sire? Did he have any notable offspring?
No, I think he was a very average sire, really. Like, I don't mind saying he was one of my favorite horses. Just he couldn't go a rough mile, but for a 16th of a mile, he'd go just as fast as horses could go. And if you put him in the right spot, he won a lot of races.
So Howard from Ottawa area asked the following. I've always looked to your style in the bike, upright and effortless, the man with the golden gloves and the softest hands. Given all the talented trotters you've sat behind over the years, please give us the name of a trotting horse that you would have loved to sit behind. And Chris from Midland asked a similar question. What horse that you drove against and didn't have the chance to drive would you most like to sit behind and why? And what horse that you didn't race against but watched and didn't have the chance to drive would you most like to drive and why?
Well, the trotter, I was always a big fan of Valley Victory. I mean, he was about a perfect mannered little horse and could always finish his mile very, very strong. And I guess the pacers, I wouldn't mind driving Cam Feller or some beach somewhere, really.
Yeah. So our next question comes from Doug from Fort Lauderdale, Florida, and he asks, what was your greatest strategy when you had the third or fourth betting favorite to win a race?
Get close to favorite. Follow him as far as you could.
So our next question comes from Russell from Sydney, Nova Scotia, and he asks, of all the big races that you have won, which one stands out the most? Which is a similar question from Ron in Philadelphia, who says, I would really like to know what was Ron Waples' all-time favorite victory.
Well, there's so many good horses I drove over the years, and like Ralph winning the Triple Crown and the Jug, I mean, that had to be right up there. No Sex Please winning the Breeders' Crown and the Maple Leaf Trot, J.M. Van Gogh winning a bunch of stakes. I mean, I was just a lucky guy that got to drive a lot of good horses.
Next question comes from Arletties from Hamilton, and they ask, how would you rank Cane Hanover among the trotters you have driven?
He wouldn't look out of place anywhere, Cane Hanover. He wasn't a horse that could leave the gate really fast, but when you're sitting in a hole with him and when you would move him, in 2 steps he'd be going just as fast as he could. He'd come out of a hole like a hobbled pacer. He just was an exceptional individual.
So the next question comes from Michael from Ontario, and he says, you've sat behind many fast horses, but who was the smartest horse you drove, pacer and trotter?
Well, I think there again, there's a bunch of them, but Ralph Hanover was not only a good horse, but he was so good-mannered. I mean, he was so good he made me look good sometimes, you know. The trotters, the same thing. I mean, I did 2 or 3 of them, Cane Hanover, No Sex Please, J.M. Van Gogh. They're all very, very good horses and very easy to drive.
So here's a question from Joe from Burlington, and he would like to know, what was your favorite horse for true heart and courage that you trained and drove in your illustrious career? I always remembered your old free-for-all horses in the early years, such as Carol Dawn's Knight, the Roan Baron, Muddy George, and Frumming Hanover, to name a few.
Yeah, those were all good horses, and I fondly remember them all, really, because they helped me a lot over the years. There again, I guess I'm going back to J.D.'s Buck. I mean, he was just such a war horse, you know. Yeah. He went to the gate every time thinking he could win. He didn't, but he went there thinking he could win. So he was one of the toughest. And I had a mare one time win $1 million. Her name was Sarah Lauren Rhodes. She won the Jugette. She was just a great race mare and a great individual to drive.
Yeah. Our next question comes from Randy from Florida, and he asks, my dad called one of your greatest victories in 1983 at Roosevelt Raceway with Ralph Hanover winning the Messenger in 157-1. Did you know that at the half you were a winner, and did you think that Kawartha Robust would set those torrid fractions?
Well, I don't really remember what the fractions were at the time. All I can tell you is I never went to the gate with Ralph Hanover that I didn't have a lot of confidence. He just had a lot of power. His manners were so good, and you could just do whatever you wanted with him. So it's easy to have a lot of confidence in a horse like that.
Yeah. So Jim from Beddick, Nova Scotia asks, other than the dead heat, did your epic duel with Bill Fahey in the Hamiltonian play out as you envisioned?
No, those 2 horses that the noses apart in about 3 or 4 different races, Probe and Park Avenue Joe, they were very competitive and very evenly matched. It was just a matter of who got the best trip, really.
Okay. So Jeff from Charlottetown, PEI asked the question, tell us about one race that you won when before the race you didn't think you had a chance.
Well, I guess the first one would come to mind would be a horse called June's Baby in the Shepherd Pace at Yonkers. Not only did I not think I'd win, I didn't even know I was down to drive until I get over there, because I went over for one of my own, and I think they were going for $500,000-600,000, and he had the 8 hole, so you weren't really figuring I'm going to win on a half-mile track, but he ended up winning. And the other one would be Fake Left and Little Brown Jug.
Okay. So Joe from West Milton, Ohio asked the question, did you think before at the Little Brown Jug that you could beat Western Hanover with Fake Left?
Definitely not. Neither did anybody else.
In that same topic area, Ted from London asks, you won the jug with fake left in a race-off versus Western Hanover. Did you have a different strategy in a race-off? And thanks. Fake left paid $7.20 and paid for my trip.
You know, I explained to a lot of people about the jug that day. The first heat, fake left, he kind of did what he wanted. I couldn't control him. The second heat, I did what I wanted. I got to control him. And the third heat, we got together and won the jug.
So John from Sarnia said the following. I feel part of the excitement of the Little Brown Jug is needing 2 heats to win. Would not bringing back 2-heat format along with more emphasis on Grand Circuit weeks help bring more enthusiasm into harness racing?
Yeah, he could be right on that. The problem being there is the speed they go nowadays. You know, a horse just, they're not a machine, so I think it's easier on the horse the way they're doing it now.
Yep. Eric Warren from Pennsylvania wondered if you could have beaten American Winner with High Noon Star in the 1993 season. If I recall correctly, there was another pretty good trotter that year by the name of Pine Chip that was also pretty tough to beat.
Yeah, High Noon Star was a sore horse. He was never really 100% sound, but he was one of the gamer horses that I drove over the years, and I always thought in the back of my mind I could beat the other horse, American Winner.
So Gordon from London wonders, even with all your success and being a true Hall of Fame driver, is there any race that you drove in that haunts you still today that you felt was your Billy Buckner moment?
That's easy, 2 of them. Amber Dallas Confederation Cup, and No Sex Please when I get locked in with them at the Elite Lop in Sweden.
Our next question comes from Gord, and Gord has known Ron for very many years and has always wondered the following. When J.M. Van Gogh fell coming to the wire at Mohawk, did you ever have that thought in the back of your head for the rest of his career?
No, because he had trot and hobbles on as a 2-year-old when he fell. And I had everybody ask me, you know, why he fell. To this day, I don't know why he fell. Trevor Ritchie, you know, who I have a lot of respect for, he had it on his television. He even put it in slow motion. And he said it just looked like the horse lost his footing. So then when he came back as a 3-year-old, we didn't have the trot and hobbles on him. So I never ever thought about that again. That was just past.
And second question, what do you think happened to Ralph Hanover's Stallion career?
Well, it was definitely disappointing. I don't know, he just, he was such a good horse and had lots of pedigree and everything, but he just never left it on. He left some fillies that went on and left decent horses, but Ralph just didn't do what we were hoping he would do.
So Don from Westchester, Nova Scotia has submitted the following. Ron, in consideration to your personal experience in investing in the offspring of Ralph Hanover, what advice would you give to those who own successful racehorses entering their stallion career? Do you A, sell all or most shares, B, maintain most shares and support the stallion by buying good mares to breed to him and invest heavily in their offspring, or C, other? Thank you for your insight and for the many memories you provided your fans over your storied career.
Well, Ralph, when we syndicated him, if I remember right, it was quite a while ago, and my memory isn't good as it used to be. I think we ended up with 8 shares, each of the partners, and we sold 4 of ours. So that I would recommend that to anybody. If you end up with a bunch of shares in your horse, sell some of them, and then you're kind of hedging your bet a little bit. But you almost got to support them. If they supported you when they're racing, you got to support them afterwards, I think.
So Dave from Chatham, Ontario asked the question, as the story goes, you were the first person to buy into Cam Fella following his racing career. As a Hall of Fame trainer and driver, how did Cam Fella's breeding career influence Ron Waples, the trainer-driver?
Very good financially. We had a couple or 3 fillies by Cam Fella that were real good, top-notch fillies, you know, and he sure didn't do me any harm. He didn't do anybody any harm. He just was a great horse.
So a question comes from John from Surrey. Of all the tracks you raced at, what was your favorite and why?
Greenwood, no doubt about it. It was an excitement there. It was mainly, I guess, because I was having some success there. The fans, I mean, you never knew. Every night when you walk up into the paddock, they had this one lady that used to follow me quite a bit, and she'd be cussing me out because maybe I drove 2 or 3 false favorites, and she's cussing me out, and I just keep saying, stick with me, baby, stick with me. I'm going to bail you out. Just stick with me. Then you'd end up winning a couple of races, then she wants to adopt you. You know, it was a crazy time, Greenwood, but it was the best.
Was that something that you may have faced more commonly or uncommonly, fans coming up to you and giving you hassle for the way you drove a horse or didn't drive a horse?
Oh yeah, for sure, but that's expected. To me, I could take it all as long as they left family out of it. I didn't like that when they entered family into it. That just didn't seem right to me. Or if they threw something at you, that wasn't the best. But you got to expect that with it. They're betting their $2 that they had to work for, so they don't want to lose it. And let's face it, they picked the right horse. You just drove bad.
Our next question comes from Paul from Halifax, and he asks, do you remember visiting Sackville Downs in Lower Sackville, Nova Scotia decades ago? If yes, what specifically do you remember most fondly?
Well, everybody treated me like royalty down there, and they fed me lobster. What more do you want than that?
So a question about speed. In your opinion, would a standardbred pacer eventually ever go as fast as a galloping thoroughbred?
Probably not, but I'm not saying it won't happen. The speed of the thoroughbreds has come down a little, but the speed of the standardbred after the last 20-25 years, it's just phenomenal. And Billy Houghton one time made a statement saying that the world's record would be held by a 2-year-old pacing colt, and everybody just kind of looked at him, okay, yeah, but they're not far off it,
Yeah.
They're just getting faster all the time, so maybe they go as fast as thoroughbreds, I don't know.
Yeah. So touching on that, we just recently saw Lather Up tie the world record. Do you think a horse will go faster than 146?
Yes.
Our next question comes from Dave from Milton, and he asks, do you think the sport has become so fixated on the speed to the detriment of the longevity of horses? Back in the glory days of harness racing, horses ran year after year, and as fans we grew and watched to certain horses. Now every week it's different horses.
Well, they certainly go so much faster now, and then the old saying is speed kills on highways and speed kills on the racetrack. A horse can only have so many fast miles in him, I believe, and then he starts to go the other way.
Yeah. So Dave also asks, what do you feel could be done to make racing a lot more exciting?
Well, I got a couple of views on that, and everybody, I'm going to take some slack over this, I'm sure, but maybe Billy's not listening to this. But I think one thing, I would like to see bigger fields. I didn't want to see it when I was driving, but now I'd like to see bigger fields that make bigger pools. And also I'd like to see them go on to a mile and an eighth and maybe even a mile and a quarter on certain races. They do some of it now, but I would like to see them do more of it, and hoping that would maybe slow them down a little bit and maybe make better racing.
Bonnie from Midland asks the question, Ronnie, does Charlie Waples walk on a lead, or is he just a very well-trained dog?
Well, thanks to my wife Liz, he's a very well-trained dog.
All right, everyone, that concludes our Ask Me Anything special with the oh-so-legendary Ronnie Waples. Ron, thank you so much for allowing us into your home and letting us bother you with some questions and taking a couple trips down memory lane with us.
Well, you're more than welcome. Does that mean it's beer time now?
I guess so.